Harry Potter is the worst example of witchcraft.
Black magic permeates the earth. The souls of the damned rise and float through the air. Black cats cross your path. Yes, October is the month when all things occult. Oh, greetings, film connoisseurs. Welcome to the No Flimflam Film Fan channel. Yes, as we said, October is the month when all things occult come into the light. But today we're going to do something special, something a little different from usual. We're going to interview somebody for whom the occult is not just a passing once-a-year fad, but a lifestyle choice. Yes, we're talking to a witch, and we're going to discuss what drew him to witchcraft, what he does on his own YouTube channel, and what he thinks of Hollywood representation of his lifestyle choice. And then at the end of the video, he's going to show us an example of the kind of things you can find on his channel. Isn't that exciting? Stay tuned. What? What's that? I hear something. No.
Yeah, so you're talking to someone today there, eh? Which interview you doing?
I'm interviewing a witch.
Which interview is it though?
No. I'm interviewing a practitioner of witchcraft.
Tell me, witchcraft do they practition?
Oh my goodness. Vern, we have vaudeville performers again. Did you forget to set out the traps? I'm sorry. I have to go deal with this.
Well, hi there. I'm here to try out for that new baseball team you're making. I want to play second base. My name is what?
Just a few quick points before we jump into the interview. First, this is not meant to represent all of witchcraft or endorse any system of beliefs or practices. It's just an effort to get to know one person's perspective on their experience with witchcraft. Second, unlike most of my other videos, this one is more of a podcast from this point onward, so you can play this in the background while you boil an egg or rehome a spider or do whatever hobbies you may do. But do come back and watch at the end for the example of Noah Darkley's YouTube content. And finally, it really helps the channel when you subscribe and click that like button. It's easy, it's harmless, it makes my day. Thank you so much. Okay, hello, Noah. Welcome to the channel. Thank you for agreeing to be part of this interview. Noah's channel is Darkly Yours. I'll provide a link to it in the description of this video. Before we get going with the interview, just briefly tell us, what do you do on your channel?
Well, thank you for having me. No flim-flam, flim-flops.
No flip.
You know what? You're watching the channel. You know, I do my own channel. I am studying Gothic theorist. I do mostly stuff about witchcraft right now, and various small bits about the occult. I'd like to do some longer pieces here, especially with the coming year. So it's just a place for all your dark and spookies explained. Whatever is arcane.
Very nice. Thank you. So I'm just going to get the rude and ignorant questions out of the way first. If you're a witch, why don't you have green skin? Why aren't you a woman? Do you even have a cat or a broom?
I do have a cat and I do have a broom.
Okay. 2 out of 3.
I also have a wand. I have an athame, which is a dagger that which is sometimes used in rituals. I don't think it's usually a healthy sign to have green skin. Sometimes, maybe around Halloween, I will. And witch was not, it's actually not a gender specific term, though it's usually ascribed to women, because witchcraft is more of a feminine art. Well, I don't like to I don't like to say it as an example, but there were lots of men who were burned as witches too.
So yeah, so if men can do it too. I mean, the popular image we have of witchcraft is an old woman maybe sitting over a cauldron. But for you, what does witchcraft mean?
Witchcraft it's a practice. It's not exactly a religion. It's more like in a lot of ways it's more like yoga or martial arts or something like that. It's something you do for spiritual purposes, for self-care purposes, for just as a lifestyle. So, I mean, it's in some contexts, it's a lot deeper, but in other contexts, it's not a whole lot more complex than really just going to the gym every week. It kind of depends on the person quite a bit as well.
So, like going to the gym is a routine you can do every day. How do you practice witchcraft on a routine basis?
Intent, awareness, it's a way of thinking about the world and the things that you do. A common example I'd like to give to people is typically a person who practices witchcraft will do something like they will do a cleansing ritual instead of taking a bath or shower. Baths are weirdly a big thing. I cannot it's sort of an inside joke, I guess, but yeah, baths come up way too much. There's a lot of ritual bathing. You'd be amazed, actually. It's your approach to life through a magical lens. What that usually amounts to is putting a lot of intent and ritualizing things that are sometimes overlooked.
Mm.
So kitchen witchery is a big thing. Just like nothing tastes like grandma made it. Well, she put a lot of intent into that meal, and that's something we don't often do. I'm not saying everyone, but it's commonly forgotten.
So you're putting a lot of focus and energy into things that might seem mundane.
Yeah, precisely so. In many cases, I'm sure there's a lot more complex rituals and things like that to give it as examples, but I rarely have seen anyone who claims to be a practitioner who does anything for no reason. There's always a practical, intentional focus on it.
Very nice. And we're using the term witch, and that has so much connotation in pop culture. You talk about practicing witchcraft. How do you feel about the word witch itself? It's often used as an insult.
Yeah, it was very traditionally used as an insult. Sometimes witch in the past, sometimes actually witch was supplanted for Protestant England and Catholic Spain, which could have meant Catholic or Protestant, depending on which side you were on. And it also could have meant Jew, for example. It could have meant a lot of different things. I don't think we're as subject to the negative connotations as we once were. It's kind of more of a fun term in our culture. Every culture has a different perspective on practitioners I call them. There's knowers, shamans, druids, wizards, sorcerers, witches, brujos, exorcists, faith healers. Everyone is kind of all lumped into witch in depending on whose view you're looking, whose lens you're looking through.
One person's faith healer might be another person's witch that needs to be kept out.
Yeah, there's definitely a historical native connotation, but I think to a certain extent, the popularity of witchcraft is about moving beyond that and practicing freely.
For you personally, when did you start taking an interest and what drew you to the practice?
I guess I always had an interest in witchy things because I was always a student of mythology. I was always a kid that I would take out Norse mythology books out of the library and Greek mythology, et cetera. And I was just fascinated by different practices throughout the world, even though I was growing up in a fairly strict Christian household. But to me, it was just all purely playful exploration. I developed a method of scrying when I was a kid because I always played with rocks. I had my own stone collection before I knew anything about all the people in the world who were obsessed with gems and crystals and whatnot. I had this little bag of stones that I would use to predict people's future relationships 2 weeks out, and that was just something I made up as a game. And it never occurred to me that it was like a witchy thing to do. It was just fun. And surprisingly, it was actually fairly accurate. I'm not, take that with a grain of salt, but yeah, I was usually right. But yeah, I guess later in life, I felt a need in my life that for a spiritual practice to be regular, and that's when I started moving away from just theoretical explorations of the occult and witchcraft into actually practicing, because it sort of filled that particular need for me. Witchcraft is all about practicality in the end.
And, coming from Christianity, where you grew up in the US, it's such a strict, you have to follow these guidelines, you have to believe these things, so much about belief versus practicality, and so much about being strict about not leaving the beliefs. A lot of people could take that the wrong way. How have people in your inner circle reacted to you moving in this direction?
Generally, I find that no one really takes me seriously. So, as like, which, as a witch, that's just like free pass. Like, I don't care if you believe or not. Um, it literally doesn't affect what I'm doing at all. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm not trying to do tricks for you. I'm doing this for myself, and frankly, it's none of anyone else's business what I'm doing. It's like, oh, he's just kind of goth, he's just kind of spooky, he's into that kind of style or culture, and that's fine with me. I am more than happy to practice the occult in full view of the public. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And along this journey, have there been other people who've helped lead you along, or has it been more of a self-learning?
I think I was always a solitary. There are different terms for what type of path you're on as a witch. There's a lot of them. So I always identified as a solitary eclectic, which means I practice by myself. I don't have a coven. I don't have a leadership structure that I go to. Many people do, and covens are very family-like structures. They're very close-knit and usually very small for the most part, though there are a few large covens. For me, it was just through practice and study, which is just what suits me just fine. um, I found other people to talk to, and particularly in the pagan community, there are a lot of various practitioners, and there's always something to share. But I definitely had to seek them out. It's a very much a seeker's practice. You're not really gonna get a lot of invitations to witchy things. You very much have to educate yourself and do your own study, and if you want to meet people, you're going to have to make an effort to be part of a community. They do exist, but they're just not like putting up flyers or flagging you down in the streets telling you you need to join them.
Right. They're not standing outside the subway with flyers.
Yeah, exactly. At least I don't think. I can't, I can't say it doesn't happen, but
I've never
it's
seen
not happened in my experience.
And the whole experience for you, it's been going on for a while. It seems to be developed out of childhood interest. What do you find on your day-to-day to be most meaningful about the practices?
One of the things for me is to just wake up in the morning and have something. For me, I just do a few motions. Some people practice motions, um, just like four, and standing in front of the sunlight, doing this stretch and making these motions, doing symbols with my hands, and that's just how I greet the day. And I just genuinely feel better after I do that. Is if I just get out of bed and do that, and I apply that to as many steps throughout the day as I can. It helps keep me centered. It brings me back to earth, so to speak. So I'm a
Sounds
bit of a space case.
sounds very meditative.
Very much so. There's a lot of crossover with yogic practices. You'll see a lot of very similar things, but also with a lot of other practices.
You have these practices, these rituals, they help keep you calm and centered. And then all the people who knew you growing up say it's just a fad, it's just a phase, always just goth and all that. If you could get across, dispel some misconceptions, what do you wish people could understand, like first and foremost about your beliefs?
One of the first things is witches are not magicians. They don't do tricks. Not usually. I mean, some do because it's fun, but witches do love games. That's that's very true because it's the spirit of exploration, and the constant seeking of inspiration. I would say witches are not Satanists. It's not the same thing. It just simply is not a religion. It's a practice. It's kind of ridiculous at the get-go there to say that witches are satanic when they don't have any religion at all. There are certainly Christo-pagans that practice witchcraft. It's especially common in Italy, for example, and in the Appalachians. There's a lot of that as well as Russia. But witchcraft does not have to be about your religious beliefs. You can't ever say it enough, though. There's no devilry involved, except in very specific cases.
I think,
Uh,
and we're going to get to Hollywood representation, but when you think of witches, like it just seems like there aren't a lot of examples of witches being good people in pop culture. So it's when the only views of witches are like in The Wizard of Oz, where she's trying to go after a little girl. Like, it's probably easy to correlate with what you think of as evil.
yeah, but there's the Wicked Witch of the West and the Good Witch of the East, is it?
True,
Or the
that's true.
North? I can't remember which.
I don't remember, but who's the witch that you do remember? The green one, who's got the
The green one. Fly, my monkeys.
Right.
Um, although I would say that any witch worth their salt would love to have flying monkeys.
Any person.
I think, yeah, any human being would love to have flying monkeys. Who doesn't want flying monkeys?
But yeah, there are a lot
bidding.
there are a lot of misconceptions, obviously, based on what you've said and what I've seen. What do you think is hardest for people to understand? Is it like the devilry thing, that it's not satanic, it's not a religion? Is there more that people are just like, you try explaining it and they're just not getting it?
Yeah, it's a very earth-centered way of thinking. I'm trying to recall a friend of mine once put it that witches are, they try to use nature for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that witches don't, in a way, manipulate things. It's just that they sort of, but they don't break with natural order in processes. It's that they try to steer them in, use their knowledge to steer them in a particular way.
But less than exploitation of nature, it's more of a natural progression moved to be beneficial to you.
Yeah, exactly. So there's not, it's not entirely, it's not selfless at all. Witches don't really believe in good and evil. There are certainly bad witches and good witches, quote unquote, but as long as you adhere to the principles of nature, you're not necessarily doing something wrong unless you start to break things. It's hard to explain it. You asked what was hard to explain, but yeah, it's in a way like putting a glamour on somebody would be kind of manipulative, but also it's not different from what people already do. You're just more knowledgeable about it.
And putting a glamour on somebody, what does that mean?
One example I like to use is I performed this experiment back in college. I tested out how people reacted when I carried a red apple and how people reacted when I carried a green apple. And I often found that carrying the green apple was far more congenial than carrying the red apple, in which people would tend to, with the green apple, people would often look and smile and nod. With the red apple, people would often glance and shyly look away or not look at all, trying to avoid a gaze, an eye-to-eye connection. And I found that incredibly fascinating. I wasn't at all into witchcraft at the time, but it turns out scientifically there's definite evidence to support the effects of colors and the presence of the apple. I mean, stores use this all the time when you're shopping, but you can do these little things to kind of speak to someone's unconscious or subconscious, whichever you prefer, if you're Jungian or Freudian, whatever. Yeah, so in the sense of a glamour, it's not a trick, but it's intentionally using tools that are at your disposal to make someone find you far more appealing than they would if you would be simply more casual. I don't know, like putting on a vampire.
Right. Okay.
Or wearing a specific kind of hat.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking of that. People who would wear silly hats to draw attention to themselves at parties.
Oh yeah, peacocking they call it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I suppose that could be that would definitely be glamoring in a sense. Yeah, I would put that in that category.
Okay, well, speaking of dressing up, we're doing this because it's Halloween and people are really into the occult and what they think of as the occult around Halloween. As somebody who practices witchcraft, what is Halloween like for you?
Well, Halloween is often considered or it's often called the Witch's New Year. This is somewhat true, though I don't think you specifically think of that in witchcraft as the same way as you would in paganism, but paganism has a better explanation. So in paganism, there's the wheel of the year. It's based on the equinoxes. So there's four spokes of the wheel of the year are on the equinoxes, and the other four are right in between them. So it's a very practical way of looking at the year. Halloween, in the old country, in my cultural and old country, at least, it would be called Samhain, which is spelled like Samhain. So Samhain it's pronounced Samhain. I don't know how that happened, but it did. But essentially, whether it be Dia de los Muertos, All Saints Day, Samhain, whatever, it's all about the last harvest. So Halloween signifies the harvest festival, the end of the growing season and the beginning of winter. So coming from cultures beyond historical recording, this has been a celebration that is the juncture between the living and the dead period of the year. That's how it would naturally be viewed. So it also became known as the period in which we are closest to the veil. We say that the veil is thinnest at Halloween, so that the dead and the living can cross back and forth and talk to each other, etc. It's more about preparing for winter, remembering loved ones, communing with your ancestors. This happens in virtually every culture. It's as ancient as I can't even imagine. So it's far more than just a witch's holiday, but it's a universal holiday. The witch is the closest to death associates with witches who are, well, let's just say more interested in talking to the dead than other people,
Right.
generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best time to do it,
So
according to lore.
yeah, that's something. I mean, there's even a Pixar movie about this, Coco.
Yeah, Coco, great film. Gets the idea.
Such a common thing around the world across cultures. And for you, in terms of practices, are there any special things that you do around Halloween?
For me, I think I'm always torn. My practices are, unless I've had like a really rough year and I want to perform a particular ritual, or I have something big coming up and I want to perform a particular ritual because it's supposed to be a charged time, whether it is or not, that emphasis can be very empowering to you individually, of embracing the celebration, taking all of that momentum that's built up and putting it into something. Or maybe you're of the mind that you're willing something into being. Whichever stance you take, I think it's a very productive time to do that. But for me personally, it tends to be a lot more like Day of the Dead. I light candles for ancestors. There's always food on every pagan holiday. There's always food. It's just like every day is a feast day. If it's a pagan holiday, it's a feast day. They're just all feasts. Feasts and fires. That's like, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. It's just like, what are we gonna do? Have a feast and a fire, of course, and drink. I don't know. So that's pretty standard. Sometimes I will get drawn into the spirit of the conventional celebration of Halloween, which I won't go into here, but it started with a Kansas woman, actually, whose garden was torn up every year on Devil's Night, which is a tradition that started in the eastern United States. But the youth would put on masks and rampage across the town, and always her flower gardens would be destroyed. So she kind of came up with the idea to have parties on Halloween to give the youth something else to do so they weren't out causing havoc and mayhem. And it didn't work the first year because she tried like a fairly tame indoor party. But then the next time she tried it, she got the whole town involved, and they took over the town square, put up tons of decorations, spooky stuff, Halloween stuff, lots of treats, lots of candy and goodies and all that stuff, and everyone dressed up, all the adults, not just the kids. And it was a rousing success. Nothing in the town got destroyed. It became so popular that police departments throughout the country actually started endorsing Halloween parties to prevent this problem from occurring. And that's how we came to our modern understanding of what a Halloween party is. It's basically an outlet to keep people from getting up to shenanigans. So I think that history alone is worth celebrating. This was a Kansas Christian head of the Garden Society woman. You'd never think.
Find a creative solution to mischief.
Yes, exactly.
Outside of Halloween, which is the big famous one, any other holidays or festivals that people might not be familiar with that you'd like to talk about?
Well, definitely look at the pagan wheel of the year, because it's really the most practical holiday layout for someone who's practicing witchcraft, because it tends to align with like I said, the equinoxes and the in-between periods. Mabon is very good. Lammas is one of my favorites because it happens in kind of the middle of summer when there's no other holidays going on. It's also called Lugnasad, Lug being the progenitor of the fairies, Lammas meaning bread day, so first harvest. It's a very nice holiday to celebrate because most of the other holidays have been co-opted in some way or another, like Yule, etc. But there's nothing else going on during Lammas, so that's the one I like to promote, because that you're not doing anything else, so you're free to have a fire, an excuse to have a bonfire and a feast, and celebrate that first harvest period however you so please. Mabon's a good one. Ostara happens about beginning of the month before Easter. Same thing, eggs and rabbits. Yeah, that's all I've got. I don't have any that's specific only to witches. At least there's none that I know, because like I said, the pagan holidays line up pretty well because of the celestial movements. And other than that, I would say full moons. Moons are big. Full moons and new moons. They're not technically holidays, but people who practice witchcraft do in particular observe those as special days.
Okay, so moving along, as promised, this is a channel all about film and entertainment. I promised the audience we would get to this. So you've been practicing witchcraft for a while now. You've also probably seen a few movies. What are your thoughts on how witchcraft and paganism more broadly are presented in film and entertainment?
In the most broad sense, it's mostly nonsense. A lot of weird portrayals, things like there's an entire series of Ouija board movies. There's so many Ouija board movies. It's a Hasbro game.
The same
Like,
people who make their Potato Head, right?
Yeah, it's like you might as well be using That would be actually better. Actually, Mr. Potato Head would be a better witchy thing than a Ouija board. I hate to disappoint some people out there, but that's just how it is. And even tarot cards were developed as a game.
Mm,
Um, you notice if you take out the major arcana out of the tarot deck, you get the 52 cards that you use for playing cards. So you can fully just play poker with a tarot deck. Inversely, you can read tarot with a deck of playing cards. You just wouldn't have the major arcana,
mm,
which sometimes is used in tarot readings anyways. But yeah, it was developed. It's about 600 years old, developed amongst nobility who made these tiny pictures or had these tiny pictures made by artists they patroned of their family members, and you know give people a bunch of little hand-sized cards and a lot of boring nights. They're eventually going to come up with a game.
huh.
So I that being said, I think there's a lot to be taken from tarot, but yeah, this is still a game. But yeah, back to film. Sorry, that went on a tangent. Yeah, a lot of the more popular films are satanically based, so they're really more Christian films than they are witchcraft films.
Mhm.
Some of them, um, like the Witch movie that came out, it's actually just called The Witch.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, I think it was a good movie. It goes along with more of like um, Eastern European Russian folklore,
Mhm.
more in the Baba Yaga vein perspective on witches, which is interesting. So I'm not saying it's without merit, but it's far from um, what you would see in commonly practiced witchcraft these days. A film that I use as a surprising example, at least it's surprising to me in a way, is the Johnny Depp Sleepy Hollow
Mm.
um, version where he plays Ichabod Crane. Um, the portrayal of the witches is very accurate in that sense. Both the good and the evil witch. They think that the horseman can't get into the church because it's holy ground or whatever, but
Mm.
it's not the case. It's because the good witch has put a protective circle on
Mm.
the space, and they show that later in the film that uh, she has been practicing witchcraft. They do suspect her of being responsible for the horseman, but she is not the one doing it. She's actually combating the other witch in a sense.
Right. It's like you were saying before, it's a practice, not necessarily like in a religion where you have to follow certain things. This is a practice. It can be for good, it can be for bad, it can be neutral. It's just things you do.
Yeah, and exactly. And the bad witch, she uses the Hesiod, the dead German soldier mercenary, as a sort of chort, as they would say in Russian culture. They would call it a chort. A chort can be a demon, a chort can be an animal, a chort can be a dead human, but it's something the witch controls through some kind of basically an infernal contract. They're enemies, but one is keeping the other captive to do their bidding,
Mm.
and that's typically something like an evil witch would do. I don't know anyone who does this, or if they can, but yeah, no. But I found the portrayal of the witches in that film to be
Mm.
fairly accurate, versus a lot of the uh, other popular culture portrayals of witches.
Mhm.
Um, I think Vikings, the series Vikings, also had a fairly accurate portrayal of a Norse, not necessarily called a witch, but they were like the outcast, the shaman,
Mhm.
the wise man, fortune teller type character. Um, that was very true to the culture of their particular practice. Um, I have difficulty thinking. I liked the Witches of Eastwick. I did, because trinities are important in witchcraft. The maiden, the mother, and the crone, that goes back to Greek culture and far back beyond that. That is a recurring element you'll find throughout witchcraft, and the um, the the monster guy that played by Jack Nicholson, um, was more of like a fairy creature, not so much a demon or anything like that, but was more like a kind of corrupting uh, fairy creature that they dabbled with and gained magical powers from. And that kind of goes, it's a little bit truer to the traditions. Um, so those are just a few examples. I'm sure I could probably come up with some more, but um, there's just so many.
Any examples where you're like, oh, that portrayal was so bad, it set us back 300 years?
Um, I mean, none that are that extreme um, because of the way that witches are basically Halloween monsters in in a sense. It's hard to think of an example that's particularly odious. Of course, you'd never like to see the witch being the bad guy, but also witches are bad people sometimes too. Like it's no different from any other kind of person. So it's like a bad witch is a bad witch. um, it's fun to see the different cultural differences. I'm just trying to think of films I've seen recently that would be good examples, but nothing is really springing to mind that would be extreme in any case.
Any bad examples that are still just enjoyable films?
Oh, like Hocus Pocus for sure. It's just like a terrible example of just anything. But it's all comedy and it's just it's for kids and it's fun and I like watching it. Um, that would be one that springs to mind. Generally enjoy almost
Yeah.
any. I'm just happy to be watching a witchy film usually,
Right.
whether it's bad or not. To be honest,
Just to have that representation is fun.
yeah, yeah, it is. Even if it's
Yeah.
comedically bad or deeply incorrect, it doesn't really seem to matter much.
What do you wish Hollywood could learn to do better in representing your practices?
I would like to not see the witchy girl in like a horror film being the one that causes the problems. Like it's like, oh, they messed up, or oh, they dabbled with something they shouldn't have. They're just a dumb kid. That's the one example I would say is kind of offensive, and it's a bit of a trope. The kind of gothy witchy girl who messes everything up somehow for everybody. I don't really care for that, and it's so cliche. I would say witches are fun. Oh, I did think of a bad example. Harry Potter is a bad example. Harry Potter is the worst example of witchcraft. You wouldn't think, you'd think like, oh no, it's from the writers from England. They have witches all through it. They portray them in a positive light. It just, no, they get everything wrong.
You mean when you took an interest in witchcraft, you didn't fly off to a magical school and go to witch college?
I mean, that would have been nice. Certainly, if I had a goblin's vault full of gold to pay for my tuition, that would have been fantastic. Sadly, money spells are less effective than I would like them to be. But yeah, no owls and weird giants. Although I can think of a friend I have that looks a little bit like Hagrid. No magic school. But yeah, Harry Potter was just a travesty in terms of the perception of magical practice.
So much you can do with magic. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to talk and all those great answers to those questions we had. You said you would be willing to show us an example of something you might do on your channel. So I will give you the floor and let you take a few minutes to show people what they can expect from Noah Darkly.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And so I'm your pal Darkly. Welcome to the dark. I'm going to show you two different little spells of differing varieties. For me, I tend to classify different types of magic into different schools. I tend to consider them in 3 schools of white magic and 3 schools of black magic. Negative and positive, pushing and pulling, or pulling and pushing. A lot of that, depending on what kind of magic you practice. So the first one is I'm going to teach you about a besom. Besom, Bessom. So this is a broom. You've commonly heard of witches' brooms, but there's practice that is still practiced in many kitchens around the world, and actually this is thriving in the United States, in the southern parts of the US. I also know this because there was a besom in my house that I overlooked for many, many years. And I would like to introduce you to that besom. This little darling has been hanging in my grandmother's kitchen since before I was born. And a besom is traditionally a witch's instrument. It's not meant for sweeping. A besom is to be treated like a person. It basically is a welcome spirit of the house. So you would hang it, you'd hang the besom as a protective sigil for those of us who are superstitious, in a prominent place in your household, usually in the living room or in the kitchen. In my case, it's always been hanging in the kitchen. And the besom is to be treated like a person, a resident, to be respected and not misused. So you want to hang it someplace that's important, that it's around the family, that's around active places. So your besom can be kind of part of your household structure. So that's a little witchy interior decorating, and also a bit of an explanation as to the nature of a witch's broom. The second spell that I would like to share for you is, I was trying to think of something that was kind of Halloween-y, not too far out there, but a little bit out there. I've got my Sharpie in this case. I've got a black candle. I actually think this is a purple candle that I grabbed by mistake, but let's pretend it's a black candle because I'm not actually going to be doing anything with it. It's just here for example. And isn't that a nice little candle holder thing? That's kind of cool, right? I love my trinkets. I love my trinkets. Okay, and yes, and you will need an egg. I prefer, ethically raised local eggs, but I mean, you do you, I guess. Any egg should work. So this is a spell for getting rid of something. So the ritual behind this is going to involve, firstly, you're going to take your candle and your space, wherever that may be. Maybe you don't have an altar. Maybe you just want to use your desk. Maybe you don't have either of those things and you just want to do it on the floor. So you're going to get that ready and you're going to outline your own spell. Say, I want to quit smoking, for example. You would say something akin to, and it's important to create your own words. Cigarettes be gone, my addiction be with you. You no longer serve me, and I'm through. Something simple, easy to remember. Write it down, because I mean, if you're like me, I forget everything. And you would write on your egg, you would write the words of the thing that you're trying to get rid of. So I wrote on my egg, cigarettes. You can't see that at all, so not much point in that, but that's okay. Afterwards, you're going to take your egg and you're going to color in the entire thing black. I'm not going to do that because I still plan to eat this egg. But your egg you will not be eating. Your egg, you will, after you have colored it black and expressed your words in your ritual and basically imbued your intention into the egg, you will take that egg in your ritual garb, whatever that means for you, whatever your dress, whatever your style feels empowering to you. You want to go in style when you're doing magic, and you will take this at midnight to a crossroads. There you will repeat your profession, proclamation that you made over the egg 3 times, and then you will smash it at the middle of the crossroads and immediately turn and walk away. The idea behind this is that at the crossroads, your intention and the thing that you're trying to get rid of will be instilled into the egg, and at the crossroads, it will most likely not be able to find its way back to you. So you're basically confusing it. It's a little bit spooky, and you will get some strange looks if someone catches you doing this. But that's my spell for the day here for you.
Thank you. That feels like something anybody could do. I mean, you will get stared at, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, totally.
You put your intention into it. That feels like it could be very therapeutic.
Yeah, it's a very therapeutic practice. Yeah, just don't accidentally summon a demon. Don't actually summon a demon or anything while you're at the crossroads. Don't dabble in that. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it, the hassle.
Yep.
In my opinion. But you do you.
Yeah, you do you. Well, thank you so much, Noah. Remember, there'll be a link to his channel in the description. Any parting words?
Have a happy Halloween and blessed be.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.